My name is Adelaide Luvinia Hines Sanford. That's the name that I answer to. But in reality, I can never know my name. I can never know what my ancestors would have called me. And I can never go home. I can never know where home is. I can never get a postcard from home or send a message by mail. And I can never forget the fact that I have no name given to me by my ancestors and have no village, no town that I can send funds to dig a well for the children that are left there. And it is that sense of urgency about knowing who I am and how I got to be who I am, and making sure that the children of today and yesterday and tomorrow would share the magnificent history of who they are, from whence they came, the fatigue, the disappointment, the broken promises, and the fact that we are flourishing. Not just surviving, but flourishing. And so I have spent a great number of my years traveling, seeking, looking. And one of the places that I traveled that was most impressive to me was Selma, Alabama. As you know, Selma, Alabama is the location of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the bridge across which our people tried to walk to get to Montgomery to petition for the right to vote. And they were beaten and brutalized and mutilated in that historic walk across that bridge. And over the years that I have gone to Selma to participate in Jubilee, which is the name of the ceremonial festivities that take place the first week in March, it has compelled me to have a sense of urgency about the importance of our children experiencing, seeing, touching, feeling, smelling, listening to the stories of our efforts to present ourselves as we know we are, human beings with dignity and worth. And so in Selma, you look at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and you walk across that bridge, reminding yourself that no one was ever punished for the brutality that our people suffered on that walk. And you visit the museum, the Voting Rights Museum, which have a record of that struggle. And you visit the Ancient Enslavement Museum that tells us the story of the brutality of slavery in the Middle Passage. And you visit Tent City, where our people had to live when their homes were burned. And this kept a flame alive in me to, in some way, participate in the effort to bring a liberated mind to our people whose chains have been removed physically, but whose minds are still enslaved with feelings of inferiority and powerlessness. So about 4 years ago, at Jubilee, Mrs. Windy Mandela was one of those who was honored with a Resistance Award. And during the course of her presentation, she said that she felt that people of African ancestry should endeavor to buy property in Selma and erect and create institutions that would tell the totality of our experiences, not just the voting rights and public transportation and public accommodations, but also the enormous struggles that have been made for every piece of victory that we have achieved. And among the group of those that were there were 3 women, seniors, elders. And we thought about the fact that the story of the quest for an education that is appropriate and liberating for children who are the descendants of African people was a story that is not written, told in its enormity. And so we decided that we would take on the responsibility of trying to create such an institution. Fortunately, the state senator, Hank Sanders, told us of a piece of property, an old warehouse, in an area that was going to become a historic landmark because the back of it overlooked the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And keeping in mind Mrs. Mandela's mandate and recommendation and suggestion to us, burning within us, we determined to buy that property. And we did, and it's paid for. And our hope is that that property would be a repository for the unwritten stories, letters, pictures, documentaries of all of the efforts, or many of the efforts, or most of the efforts that were made toward providing an education that would be an act of rebellion against the time when people of African ancestry were not allowed to read or write, when they were scorned and beaten, fingers broken, tongues mutilated if they were found engaged in that effort. And at the same time, knowing that in the African culture, education is a core value. The priests studied 40 years to be teachers. Education was a sacred piece of our heritage. And in spite of everything else that was happening, our people kept in their hearts and in their minds a memory of the profound importance of education. And in whatever way they could, hanging out the quilts, whispering in the wind, beating it in the drums, opening it in the churches, in their backyards, in their living rooms, the freedom schools, the efforts of Septima Clark, the efforts of people who tried as hard as they could. A washerwoman, Osceola McCarty, who saved her money from washing to send some money so that children of African ancestry could go to Ole Miss when she was not able to go to school. Our children need to know these stories. They need to know about the children in Soweto who were slaughtered because they wanted to learn in their language. They must know about the Little Rock Nine. They must know about the movement, the children in Montgomery who were beaten and hosed down by adults when they were trying to speak for their freedom. They must know about the children in Chicago who went to jail and demonstrated for integration. They must know the results of Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education, where in the South they closed the schools rather than integrate a land of the law. They must know about the freedom schools and what their mandate was: to dispel the myth of black inferiority and to dispel the myth of white superiority. And we're still struggling with that, even today. So it was that desire that created Elders House, a gift from the elders to the children, where they can be strengthened, encouraged, nurtured, warmed, inspired, given a sense of resilience and resistance so that they can know the power and the force of education, not just schooling, because education is more than schooling. It is the totality of the experiences that our children have an opportunity to be exposed to. So Elders House is there on Water Street, a historic landmark in Selma, Alabama. We have been able to have events there, but it needs to be developed into a structure that can enhance all that we hope that it will be. Meaning by that, we need roofing, we need flooring, we need windows, we need a kitchen, we need heat and air conditioning, and we hope that our entertainers and our athletes and our students and our scholars and our people who are the mothers and fathers of generations past and our young people who are the mothers and fathers of tomorrow will feel the throb. Some of them who went to jail in Birmingham are still alive. The young people who went through the horrendous experience of open enrollment. Those who went to half-day schools for 10 and 15 years, never having a full day of school here in New York City. Those who were responsible for the development of Black Studies programs, and also those who have resisted the total and true story of America and the richness of the continent of Africa. We find today that our children, rather than being involved in those kinds of movements, are very often self-destructive. And when we talk to them, one of the constants is that they do not know their history. They do not know their true identity. And if you put a child free here in America, theoretically free, he doesn't know his name. He has no language. He has no connection to the past. Very often he will have no hope for the future. So it's heavy on my heart as an elder. And the two other women who joined with me, all of whom were over 70 years of age, but purchased that building. We didn't do as well as Osceola McCarthy did, but we did take what we had and bought that institution, and it is paid for. And at this point, we are inviting all of those who understand the importance of this piece of our history in order to formulate what our future will be and the kinds of people that we need in order to build that future, and are fearless in terms of the consequences of speaking the truth, to join with us. Let your name be there. Let your teacher's name be there. Let your college professor's name be there. Let your Sunday school teacher's name be there to say, I knew, I remember, I recall, and I promise.